They came in pretending to be HOA enforcers. Minutes later, a young girl was seriously injured, and a trained Navy SEAL father did what he was trained to do: protect his family without hesitation. In many suburban neighborhoods, the presence of an HOA is a common part of daily life. These organizations manage the visual appearance, rule enforcement, and overall order of a residential community. It's not unusual to occasionally receive letters about a mailbox needing fresh paint or a trash can being left out too long. So, when two men arrived claiming to be HOA enforcers, it didn't immediately raise suspicion. They were dressed in official-looking uniforms, complete with tactical vests, radios, and embroidered patches that resembled those worn by private security contractors. Their vehicle, parked just outside the home, was a dark SUV outfitted with light bars and decals that, at a glance, mimicked municipal branding. Everything about them suggested legitimacy until they started speaking. The men said they were there to conduct an urgent inspection regarding multiple HOA violations, including unauthorized property modifications, overgrown landscaping, and unapproved security cameras. They claimed the violations had reached a level requiring immediate access to the home's exterior, as well as parts of the backyard and garage. The list of infractions sounded overly detailed and oddly aggressive, especially given that no previous notice had been sent. Their tone was confrontational. They insisted the violations had already incurred fines and warned that further noncompliance would result in legal action. They used intimidation tactics, rapid speech, authoritative posture, and vague threats of penalties. They demanded access to the side gate and backyard immediately, stating they didn't need permission and were just doing their job. This raised eyebrows. When asked to produce official identification or a written notice, the men became evasive. One flipped open a badge wallet for barely a second, flashing a metal emblem that didn't resemble any known agency. The other pointed to a clipboard filled with generic documents lacking HOA letterhead or signatures. Their refusal to provide clear proof of their affiliation, paired with the urgency and aggression of their demands, quickly shifted the atmosphere from strange to alarming. Despite mounting concerns, the family attempted to stay calm and cooperative at first, not wanting to escalate the situation. Many residents aren't fully informed about what powers HOAs truly have, and the intimidating appearance and confident speech of the imposters created just enough uncertainty. It was difficult in the moment to determine whether they were legitimate officials or simply acting the part. The fear of unintentionally violating HOA rules, combined with a natural desire to avoid conflict, led the family to initially comply with their instructions. The fake officers split up, moving toward various parts of the property with a sense of entitlement. One claimed he needed to check structural modifications, while the other cited safety concerns over supposed electrical installations. Neither had tools, scanners, or any equipment a real inspector might carry, just notepads, smartphones, and vague authority. By this point, internal alarm bells were sounding. Their focus shifted frequently, and they asked unusual questions unrelated to property maintenance, such as how many people lived in the home, whether any recent renovations had been done, and how many security cameras were functioning. These inquiries felt invasive and suspicious. Their interest appeared less about rule enforcement and more about surveillance and reconnaissance. One of the family members, growing more skeptical by the minute, made the quiet decision to document the interaction. A phone was discreetly used to begin recording audio. Still, the fake HOA officers continued their fake inspection, growing bolder. Their language suggested that penalties could be avoided if certain access was granted quickly, which sounded more like a shakedown than any formal enforcement process. Eventually, one of the imposters attempted to enter a restricted area behind the home without consent. He claimed the HOA had previously notified the family of a mandatory inspection and accused them of willful obstruction. At that moment, the line was crossed. The demands were no longer uncomfortable, they were illegal. The family now faced the full realization that something was dangerously wrong. These men were not inspectors. They were not HOA officials. They had no authority. What began as a strange but seemingly official visit had transformed into an illegal trespass and possible prelude to a home invasion. The impersonators had used fear, fake authority, and deception to gain proximity and trust, until their true intentions started to show. The disturbing part was how easy it had been. A couple of uniforms, a convincing story, and an authoritative tone had allowed two complete strangers to enter a private property under false pretenses. And until that moment, no one had been able to fully stop them. This was no longer about HOA rules or violations. It was about safety, deception, and a family being targeted in broad daylight. This encounter marked the beginning of a dangerous chain of events, one that would end in violence, legal action, and viral headlines. But it all started with a knock at the door, a fake badge, and a threat that felt all too real. What began as a fraudulent inspection attempt quickly devolved into physical aggression and real danger. The men, emboldened by the family's initial compliance and apparent hesitation, escalated their tactics. When verbal pressure failed to produce full access, they resorted to force. Ignoring objections, one of the imposters pushed past boundaries, attempting to open doors and move deeper into restricted areas of the property. At this point, any illusion of legitimacy evaporated. They were no longer pretending to be officials, they were acting like intruders. Tension skyrocketed when the daughter attempted to block their entry into the home's interior. Rather than backing off, one of the men reacted violently. With no regard for her safety, he shoved her out of the way. The impact was brutal. She fell hard onto a concrete step, and the pain was immediate and severe. The result: 6 fractured bones in her back, a devastating injury that would require emergency care and months of recovery. The family was thrown into panic. What they had tried to navigate diplomatically had now become a criminal assault. The daughter lay injured, and the threat level had escalated from verbal intimidation to physical harm. In the chaos, the fake officers shouted conflicting commands, trying to maintain control of the situation, but their credibility had been shattered. Their erratic behavior and refusal to retreat only intensified the fear and urgency. The violent act committed against the daughter served as a breaking point. Any hesitation about the nature of the threat was gone. The family now faced the unthinkable. A group of strangers, masquerading as HOA enforcement, had crossed the line into a violent home invasion. The daughter's injury was not a consequence of an accident or miscommunication. It was a direct result of aggression and disregard for personal safety. The situation, once filled with uncertainty and questions, had transformed into a crisis requiring immediate defense and emergency intervention. The home was no longer just under scrutiny, it had become a battleground, and with a severely injured family member and violent impersonators still on the property, the next moments would determine whether this ended in escape, capture, or worse. Faced with a sudden act of violence, the father, an experienced Navy SEAL, did not freeze, panic, or question the severity of the threat. His military training, refined through years of high-stakes operations, allowed him to assess the situation with clarity. He understood that his family was no longer dealing with trespassers or impersonators. These men had become violent aggressors, willing to injure a child to assert control over the home. That meant there was no room for negotiation, only action. In that split second, survival instincts and protective urgency merged. The father had spent years preparing for moments when hesitation could cost lives. This time, the life at risk was his daughter's. He immediately moved to secure his home and protect his family using the same principles that had kept him alive in hostile zones across the world: decisiveness, precision, and measured force. He drew his legally owned firearm and issued a warning. The aggressors, now realizing they had crossed a line with a man who was not only armed but trained, responded with panic. One attempted to flee, while the other moved erratically, possibly reaching for a weapon or continuing to threaten the family. At that point, the father discharged his weapon. The shots were aimed and controlled, intended to neutralize the threat, not escalate chaos. The sound of gunfire marked the end of the intruder's false authority. Emergency services were called immediately after the confrontation. The father stayed calm and compliant with authorities, detailing the attack, identifying the injuries, and turning over surveillance footage that had been running during the entire encounter. His focus remained on his daughter's well-being, ensuring medical help arrived as quickly as possible. When law enforcement arrived, the facts began to unfold quickly. The uniforms were fake. The vehicle was unregistered. The badges were cheap replicas. The men were not affiliated with any HOA, police department, or security contractor. They were impersonators with criminal intent, and now they were fugitives with gunshot wounds and felony charges pending. The father's response was later deemed lawful under the state's self-defense statutes. In a matter of minutes, he had shifted from family man to protector, using his elite training to end a dangerous assault and potentially save more than one life. Following the incident, law enforcement launched a full-scale investigation into the two individuals who had posed as HOA officials. It was quickly confirmed that neither man had any legitimate affiliation with the Homeowners Association, law enforcement, or licensed security services. Their uniforms, badges, and vehicle markings were counterfeit, designed to deceive and intimidate. Authorities identified the suspects as part of a small ring involved in impersonation scams and potential residential thefts. Charges were filed swiftly. Both men faced multiple felony counts, including impersonating a public official, aggravated assault, criminal trespass, and conspiracy to commit burglary. One of them, injured during the altercation, was apprehended at a local hospital. The second was later tracked down and arrested after a multi-agency search. Their plan had not only failed, but resulted in legal consequences that could lead to years of imprisonment. The father's response was evaluated by investigators and ultimately ruled as justified under the state's self-defense and castle doctrine laws. He had acted to protect his family from an unlawful, violent intrusion. Prosecutors determined there was no excessive use of force and no criminal charges would be brought against him. His military background and calm handling of the situation further validated the decision. The daughter began her medical recovery with ongoing support. Her injuries were serious, but she was expected to heal fully with time. The family chose to speak out publicly, not for recognition, but to raise awareness about the dangers of impersonation crimes and the importance of vigilance. They encouraged homeowners to never allow access to their property without proper verification, no matter how official someone may appear. The incident sparked a broader conversation throughout the community about security, HOA, overreach, and personal rights. Many residents began reevaluating their own safety protocols, installing better surveillance, and demanding more transparency from legitimate HOA leadership. The story served as a sobering reminder that real threats don't always come with warning signs, and that authority can be faked with enough confidence and costume. In the end, the event stood as a powerful example of how preparedness, awareness, and a refusal to back down can turn a crisis into a moment of justice. The family's strength sent a clear message. No one pretends their way into a home without consequences. Call to action. For more jaw-dropping real-life showdowns, hit subscribe and stay locked in to expect stories.